To continue with the history of Warlock pets, I put a poll over my Patreon to see which one I should cover next, and Succubus were chosen for some reason. The Succubus Warlock pet was the 13th most dangerous NPC in vanilla WoW. When Blizzard used to announce random internal stats, they put a list of the 20 most dangerous NPCs in the game. NPCs that have gotten the most killing blows over all the others. And since Warlocks all use the same pets more or less, 3 of their pets showed up on this top 20 list. The Warlock Imp and Felhunter made spots 19 and 20 respectively, with Succubus beating both of them out by a lot more at 13th place. The reason being is probably because Succubus were a more popular PvP pet at the time, and stats were taken from player deaths, so the most used pet for PvP would obviously be higher on the list. In vanilla WoW, the Succubus was meant to be the medium pet. It had heavier armor than the Imp, but less than the Voidwalker. It could also melee when it ran out of mana, so it was better on longer fights than the Imp for its DPS, since the Imp could not attack if it didn't have mana, since it did not have a melee attack. In the Succubus's first form, it had 4 attacks, the first being Lash of Pain, which was its standard basic attack. It had a melee range and a 12-second cooldown. In Cataclysm, it was given a 20-yard range and its cooldown was removed, making it usable all the time and from a little further away. It used to be it would just use Lash of Pain as kind of a cooldown based nuke, and then just melee while it had nothing else to do. So Blizzard, I assume, thought it would be more fitting for the Succubus to just attack with its whip non-stop. Its second ability was Soothing Kiss, with the effect of soothes the target, increasing the chance that it will attack something else, with a melee range and a 4-second cooldown. This was the pet's standard threat dump. A lot of pets back in the day used to have some ability to reduce their threat, since this was still kinda a concern until around Cataclysm. Then in Cataclysm, Soothing Kiss was removed, like most pet threat reduction abilities, and Succubus were given Whiplash instead. Whiplash does damage in an area and knocks back enemies hit. With a 30-yard range, it can be used like a Frost Elemental's Freeze, as it's a targeted circle the player has to use, and on a 25-second cooldown. Its third ability was Seduction. The effect seduces the target, preventing all actions for up to 15 seconds. Any damage caused will remove the effect. Only works against humanoids. Seduction was on the same DRs as Fear, so a Warlock couldn't layer CCs on one target. Warlocks were one of the few classes with 2 spammable CCs with no cooldown, if they used a Succubus. In the Burning Crusade, Warlocks had a talent that made Seduction instant cast, but as the spell is a channeled ability, it just meant the Succubus didn't have to stand still for 1.5 seconds more. In Warlords of Draenor, it was given a 30-second cooldown, removing its spam ability. Now it's just a cooldown based CC that can be interrupted. Its fourth ability was Lesser Invisibility. All it did was turn the Succubus invisible for 5 minutes. That way it couldn't be opened up on, I guess. I think its best use were to probably let it sneak up on people in PvP to seduce them, or for not having to dismiss the pet if you jump down a ledge, since the pet would just run down the nearest ramp and pull everything. But not the Succubus, I'd assume. The ability was given the option to set on autocast in patch 1.7, towards the middle of vanilla WoW, and hasn't had any major changes since. Before you obtained your Warlock pets just by leveling up, you had to do a quest chain for all of your demons to bind them to you. The Succubus quest required you to obtain the hearts of 2 pure, good, and loving men. The quest was different for each faction and slightly different for different races as well, but it was basically go out and kill 2 good men to take their hearts. This quest was actually a contender to appear in my video on morally questionable quest, since it involves you going out and killing good people. But since there's no way to get good footage of this quest, I didn't include it. Anyways, once you go out and kill the 2 men and bring their hearts back, you summon the Succubus and defeat her to make her your servant. The hard part of the quest was that it would sometimes send you deep into enemy territories to find the men, and sometimes in zones higher than the level of the quest. So it was usually just done along with the felhunter quest later on, and rarely at the level you could actually get her. In the Burning Crusade, Succubus were the go-to pet for Warlocks who raided. But it's not for the typical reasons you'd think. You see, warlocks had this talent called demonic sacrifice, which gave the warlock a different effect based on which demon it was used on. If used on a succubus, it gave warlocks a nice shadow damage buff. And the best rotation for warlocks to use in the Burning Crusade was to spam nothing but Shadow Bolt. So just a straight buff to their most used ability was a no-brainer. But since a succubus was sacrificed for the buff, it wasn't really used as a pet and more as a buff. So I guess it wasn't really used in the traditional sense as a pet. When your succubus takes damage, she makes a little noise in both pain and pleasure. This little feature was planned to be a talent. Lovestruck was going to be a deep demonology talent in early Wrath Beta, but got removed before release. The effect was, while the succubus is active, physical attacks done to you or your succubus have an up to 15% chance to heal you or your succubus instead of doing damage. The healing caused by Lovestruck will not exceed 50% of the warlock or succubus's total health. This effect has a 6-second cooldown. It's a really neat little flavor ability, but it has some drawbacks. For one, a 15% chance to completely not take damage and instead heal that damage is pretty huge, and might have forced players to take succubus for heavy damage progression fights. And two, I don't think they wanted warlocks to have too many talents, only working on one pet. Or maybe the effect was really underwhelming and couldn't really be buffed without making it too overpowered, so it was just removed rather than deal with the headache of having to balance it correctly. It wouldn't be the first time Blizzard just removed a talent rather than try and balance it. In Mists of Pandaria, warlocks could summon upgraded versions of certain pets, and the succubus version was a Shivara. The abilities of the Shivara were all exactly the same as the succubus's, only with different names and higher damage values. The only notable difference is the Shivara's Mesmerize ability, which, as an upgraded seduction ability, worked on more targets than just humanoids. And for the most part, that's kinda it when it comes to the history of succubuses. There haven't been too many changes to them over the years, surprisingly. So I'll just list some fun facts about succubus to end the video off. Did you know, before patch 1.4, succubus had less clothes on than they do now? They were basically wearing a bikini-style armor, which was later changed to a bikini-style armor with a chestplate that they kept when the model was updated for Legion. Did you know, if you do the emote /kiss or /flirt to your succubus or even someone else's, little hearts will float above you and the succubus's heads? Did you know, there's an alternate fel skin to succubus you can get a glyph for? If you're a scribe, you can get the pattern for it when a certain world quest is active on the Broken Shore, by doing a /kiss on the fel succubus that helps you out on that world quest. And that's the end of the video. If you have suggestions for future history topics, leave them as a comment on this video.